with that, in India we say that, the guest is a god. So I will start with you, Michael. You're all the way from Australia, run a diversified business. Wanted your reflection because the concept of design thinking is not very new. It was always there in some shape or form. And whenever product innovation got into action, it was meant for an end consumer. You are running a large area of business in your organization, deal with various different kind of customers, age groups, etc. Any reflection how you are leveraging some of these philosophies to make meaningful and a memorable product for your consumers?
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to the Economic Times and the sponsors for inviting me to be here tonight. It's a wonderful conference, and I've really enjoyed it. I think the thing about thinking design is, as you said, it's not new. All successful businesses put the customer front and center. I think when you look at the history of it, it was developed by a Nobel laureate. It's out of Stanford, I think, in the 60s. And it was a multi-dimensional approach that was really perfecting and changing the scientific method. And it was around a hypothesis that was putting the consumer in an empathetic way front and center. So it was for large companies in particular, so they could design products and services, which large companies often don't do well, in a way that could resonate with their customers. So I think in our situation, we've always had the customer front and center. But it's a process that enlists a whole lot of dimensions within the organisation. So we obviously look at data, or what do the customers buy. So one of my main businesses is residential construction and community development. And what we do is we talk to the customer directly. We do very detailed customer research. We look at trends overseas and in other states in Australia. And we try and tap in to what they really want. But something that always occurs to me is there's a limit to that aspect of it. Steve Jobs said, and he quoted Henry Ford, he said, if Henry Ford gave the customer what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse. There's an element of trying to anticipate what the customer wants and what the customer will want without the customer even knowing about it. And I think that's where truly innovative companies do particularly well. Steve Jobs also said it well. He said, we're not about reading what's on the page, we're about writing what's on the page. So I think when you can try and introduce an element of that, sometimes you make mistakes, but consistent with the scientific method, you test the hypothesis, you analyse the data, and then you amend the hypothesis based on that data. So you're always improving your products, whether in our case that's houses or community blocks in developments, or it's distilled products, vodkas and gins and what have you.
Thank you, thank you. So may I come to Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill, yours is an industry also going through a huge amount of transformation. And there's an ecosystem around which you need to work. So there is one end of consumer, and consumer spread across different demography, different, I would say, classification. But when you try to design a product, how do you ensure that, one, it is something that will last and get accepted and adopted? And second, something which is built, which gives pride to also your employers who are working on it. It is not only about the end consumer, but what drives delight to your own employees. Any reflection on that?
Well, thank you. This word of design thinking I discovered, in fact, today. But I'll relate my own stories, perhaps something will come out of it. But in this Hero Electric that we make electric two-wheelers, it's a 14 years old organization. I'm running the business for the last 14 years. And before that, for or 25 years, I was doing all with his Hondas, Yamahas, and all the two-wheelers. First, when I joined here, the first few years were unlearning rather than building on what I had learned in 25 years. And few things that I got in legacy, I had to shred them, in fact, because they were SOPs. They were boundaries of typical, efficient two-wheeler companies, copy-pasted. And I very soon discovered that this cannot be a mantra for success. Here, even after 10, 14 years, we call ourselves a startup because we are learning every day. And the organization is learning, everybody is learning. It's something which was never experienced in India, perhaps. Right from 40, 50 years of looking at those Vespas and Activas and Pleasures and Hero CDs, you tend to get into the grove of creating products which are similar to that or which conform to that type of doctrines of design. But in electric, it is altogether different. It is so disruptive, and there are 2 or 3 objectives which are very different from two-wheeler in a petrol side. The foremost is sustainability. And we have to see it from that point of view. Another one is comfort, convenience as a mobility solution, not a copy-paste of a sort of example, a CD100 or something. So that's why what I try to do, and I don't know whether I'm successful or not, but was try to unshackle the organization at every level. Lot of backlash on account of that, because we were mostly automotive people and highly efficient, but least effective. So from that point of view, we had to unshackle, which means create no boundaries, risk-taking capabilities, just translate it in many words to people who were in the front end particularly. And typically, the front end dealers, service technicians, salesperson were the ones who were empowered the most. Anybody who tried to deviate and bypass that system, whether it is somebody else in the line of hierarchy, would go back to the same frontline guy to get the power. That gave a sort of empowerment to the front line. That gave also an opportunity to widen the boundaries. We sort of tried to operate within sort of unshackled boundaries, but gave them general guidelines. So for a few years, it was a mess. It was sort of many mistakes made, many of the learnings done. But lately, for the last 4 or 5 years, I see this is paying good results, and we are able to really truly answer this sort of a disruptive technology that we are handling. Right, not only from the product, but anything to do with the product, the services, the customer handling, end of life, anything to do with the product is also outside the product. So as much as it is inside, our innovation goes outside the product also. And that's how we differentiate from competition. That's how we differentiate from the petrol, so-called dirty fuel vehicles now. Thank you.
Thanks. If I may come to you, taking a cue from what Mr. Gill just said, meeting unmet needs of customer is a bit abstract, and there is always a fear of failure in it. As a business leader, how ready are we to experiment and willing to fail to ensure that what we develop is meaningful? Is that brewing as a culture in organizations? Any reflection on that?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks for having me here, and good evening, everybody. I'll answer that in 2 parts. So I work for Perfetti. So we are in the consumer product space. So clearly where, like you mentioned, consumer is square and center of the whole thing. One thing to keep in mind is, very often we say we need to understand consumer needs and then meet them through our products and services. But one thing probably we need to start looking more and more is how to even understand unarticulated needs. It's almost like discovering or suggesting needs for consumers which they themselves may not be aware of. Let me just give you a simple example. We recently launched a product which is a gum-filled lollipop. Now, if you go and ask a consumer, would you like a lollipop with a chewing gum inside it? They would have said, oh, I've never thought of that, or I didn't think of it, right? So it's not something that would come through conventional consumer research. But if you had a deep understanding of consumers, then you might start thinking, okay, there are lollipops, but what can I do to offer a relevant differentiation in the lollipop? which is that after eating the lollipop for a while, you get bored and you want to get something else, which is an interesting experience to have, right? So that's how we launched a gum-filled lollipop, which has been a runaway success, right? So one point is really to go deeper than the articulated needs, to really get to the unarticulated or the latent needs of consumers, right? So that's one part of it. From the other side, if you look at it, back to your point on culture, I think one of the most important things is how do you offer a culture which is an empowered culture, which encourages prototyping and experimentation, and where there is little fear of failure. And if at all you fail fast. And I think that has to come right from the top. Because very often we find that one of the biggest reasons for people not trying anything is the fear of failure. If I failed, how will it reflect in my annual appraisal? Or what will happen to my bonus? And so on and so forth. So if as leaders, we are able to build a culture where we say, let's try 10 different things, 5 work, 5 don't, but that's okay. But just make sure that A, like you said, pick up the learnings from there, and those learnings need to be carried forward, and fail fast. So I think if you're able to do some of this, I think we'd be able to build a culture which truly embraces innovation.
Thanks, really, good to perspective. So if I may come to Gaurav, the industry that you are in is becoming extremely personalized by day. Human choices are becoming very different. Even in a family, the choices are becoming different. I would like to have my room, my washroom differently designed. I like something very different than, my parents or my kids. In a family, when there are such unmet requirements coming up, how challenging is it to keep pace with innovation and bring agility to drive, the speed to market?
Yeah, I think great question, and all the more seen in the pandemic times when everybody was at home. Everybody had time to analyze not just their own needs, but the whole needs of the home as well. So it was very relevant. But I think, before I get into this, even on a macro level, I mean, look at how things changed. Luxury was defined very, very differently earlier as in the last few years. But within that, a lot of changes have taken place even on the macro perspective. I think affluence has changed. The whole concept of what is affluence has changed. Luxury was always grand, less is more now. So these are macro trends which have now changed all across. And even if it's a house that has 5 people that want 5 different things, ultimately they align to some larger shifts in the macro trends. So here the point is to be able to offer individualization, yet have a portfolio of product that aligns on the core pillars of our company of design, innovation, and technology. So we need to stick to our expertise, we need to stick to what we are good at, but at the same time get closer to the consumer needs, the ones that are visible, the ones that are not visible, and try and individualize the experience that they get. One very small example I would give actually is that we have a product called the Rain Tunes. Now everybody is in your house, nobody is really interacting with anyone outside, you're only interacting inwards. We always had showers that gave visible aesthetics in the form of sprays or such things. We actually integrated an audio-visual experience, we integrated fragrance into it, and we integrated a mood sequence into it. So it's about involving a customer and yet sticking to your core pillars that kind of gives that solution.
Thanks. Coming to Kamal, again, a segment which is so diverse, Kamal. You have various class of buyers. Somebody who's probably just started to work, somebody who's just trying to invest in something as an investment, and somebody who wants it as an asset. Demands are very different. Is it possible, by even looking at some concepts like design thinking, to kind of build products which are very, very meaningful when it comes to what is actually required for me as a buyer out of that? There could be frills, there could be 20 other dangles around it, but ultimately there are few aspects of a product which are the must to have. And then comes the other things around it which make it look jazzy, good. All those frills around it. how does design thinking challenge you to say the core of the product is something that should serve the need of the customer?
Sure. Design thinking, as we all have been talking for the last 15, 20 minutes, I think to understand the concept itself, it's important to know where it starts and where it ends, and both these ends and edges are very important. Where it starts from is essentially knowing your customer and putting the customer at the center of everything that you want to do in terms of innovation, specifically speaking. I think this is what one of my co-panelists also said. But at the end of the process, it's about prototyping. It's about knowing where you are going right and where you are going wrong. In business, it's about viability, it's about doability, it's about technological feasibility, et cetera, et cetera. But all of them are coming in the center of one consumer on the one side and the prototyping at the end of the process. And I think you said that where to stop, where to say, oh, now is the time to say yes or no to the innovation is very important. That's where prototyping comes into a very important kind of, lever there. How do we assess consumers, their must-haves, et cetera, et cetera? I think the approach tells us that it's not important to slice and dice a lot of data. What is treated is one aspect of the issue, and that's something which can be done by everybody. It's me too, and it's not something that will differentiate you from others. What's important to have some qualitative conversations with your consumers, so it's not analyzing a lot of tables, et cetera, et cetera. It's about going down there, talking to the consumers, being on the ground, and then having conversations which are very, very qualitative, and then trying and getting some clues out of those conversations. Because sometimes consciously, subconsciously, consumers will say a few words which are very important. They don't emerge out of data. They'll never emerge out of data. But you still get a lot of clues when you talk to them. Now, how do you go about it? How do you identify those kind of trends and expectations that the consumers have which are not reflecting in data is something which is all important. That what differentiates design thinking from the normal way of innovation and finding what consumers need. It's not about need, it's about, as you said, it's about knowing more than the stated and articulated needs. It's about when Ford said that, if consumers were to be asked, we would have got faster horses. It's absolutely right. And that's how you do it. Have meaningful conversations with the consumers. Don't rely too much on data. Rely on conversations. Rely on qualitative aspects of what a consumer might or might not need and what might actually, kind of make him happy.
Michael, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just picking up on something that you touched on earlier. I think the best market research, because you can spend forever doing the things I talked about, doing market research, talking to the customers, trying to understand the zeitgeist in the marketplace. But I think the absolute best market research is to test a product in the market. And that's something we do. We will design quickly. We have a wonderful team of people. A number of women involved in our design team are always pushing for extra storage because they say this is something men don't understand, including me. And I think they're right. But the other thing we do is, so we test it in the market quickly. And it's often the case, the products you think are going to be the best performers end up being very poor performers. And some of the ones that you think will do well, won't do well, they just kill it. So there's an X factor there that's quite hard to discern. And I think that's the best market research of all. And I'd like to give you a quick example around a product that we put together based on what we anticipated the customer would want. The customer didn't ask for it. So I had worked with a professor, Professor Fraser Mustard, who's a world-class thinker. He's recently passed away. He was a world-class thinker in kids learning through play. And the trend in Australia, and it may be the case here as well, is through councils to try and de-risk parks. They're advised by their legal officers to reduce the element of risk. But in so doing, they've made parks and playgrounds really boring. Professor Mustard says the first risk your kid takes should not be when they're of a driving age and they're strapping themselves into a car for the first time and putting their key in the ignition. because that's how kids die. So he says they need to be able to learn through play. That's how they calibrate risk. So we put together a natural playing park where kids could go on flying foxes and skin their knees and hurt themselves, which was incredibly successful. So much so that we've amped it up and amped it up. Every new park we do is a kid learning through play park. And it's something that the customers have just flocked to. And now everyone is copying. But it's a good example, I think, of trying to anticipate market requirements and give the customer something that they didn't know they wanted.
Thanks, Mike. So I'll come back, to Gill and Rajesh. Like to hear from both of you because very two different industry. The balance between experimentation and return on investment. Where do you say stop?
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting question because we toggle with it and grapple with it all the time. So like I said, I think it's good to go wide to start with in terms of the options and the opportunities that you have when you're prototyping. But even as you're prototyping, some key considerations to keep in mind is one, scalability. I mean, there's no point in prototyping something which you know you can't scale up, right? So doing the math at the beginning to at least have a sense of, does this going to make commercial sense, is very, very important. So that's one part of it. And the other is not just scalability, but sustainability over a period of time. So there are two axes, right? One is from a monetary point of view, and the other is from a time point of view. So these two would be very critical things to keep in mind, even while you prototype. So my, at least the way we look at it is, if there are some ideas, let's go and prototype, but let at least have a sense of, is this scalable and is this sustainable? So that's the way I would look at it.
Mr. Gill?
Where I'll put the verticality into it, what we do is like the basic needs functionality is a hygiene, and that's well understood that, okay, if electric scooter has to perform. The next level is obviously customer delight, which is a differentiator. That's where the innovation starts. But the ultimate one is like when you make a dish, you put that cilantro at the last moment, is the customer bliss or ecstasy. And that's where everything makes so much of a difference. That's where innovation really centers. So that's where in organization like ours, in business like ours, we have to think it from those three layering process and not one set of people. And there's a lot of constant feedback from customers, very, very unstructured feedback that comes to be taken to take care of these three level of functionality, delight, and sort of a bliss, to be able to create that last best part of the vehicle, which talks so easily to a customer of his wants, needs, desired or otherwise.
Thank you. I have a couple of minutes left, so I would come to both you, Gaurav and Kamal. Your business kind of thrives on working with ecosystem. Design thinking, has it ever told you, you stop here, this is something you need to leverage someone else, and vice versa? So, any thoughts from both of you on that?
Yeah, I mean, design, we are a real estate developer and we do housing, right? And housing is one of those subjects which is so close to everybody who's involved in the process. And to figure out what to do and what not to do is so very subjective, as you said in the very beginning. There are 5 members in a family, they don't all agree to what is required, isn't it? And that's a very fact of our lives. And when you're doing 100 acres and building some 3,000 houses there, you got to deal with people with a lot of diversity. Design thinking and the process around it surely gives us a framework where we could put some basic discipline in place and say, hey, this is how we are going to be going about the product in this specific case. Somebody again laid a lot of emphasis on prototyping, and how do you do that in real estate, for example? You don't create a product and then do prototyping and this is what we'll do. This is going to take a lot of time. So how we will go about it is to simply phase it out, do a few houses, do 10 acres out of 100, figure out what it takes, what is liked and what is not liked, and then replicate very quickly in the rest of 90 acres, etc. That's one way to simplify the process and implement the same kind of processes. But then to enable that to happen, you need a very, very agile organization where you say, okay, 10 acres is done, we got our lessons, the prototype is established, the product is established, but how do we now very quickly replicate it? Because there's competition out there, there's time value of money, the investments are huge, and hence to replicate, we'll need a lot of process to be done subsequent stages, and that's where the agility will come in. So that's how the challenges are, and that's how we will take this process, and that's how we have been doing things. And I think this is a great framework to adapt in many situations. Product is one aspect of it. Processes, for example, you can improve so many things with the same kind of principle. For example, we realized in pandemic that people want to not come to site and still want to buy, because there was an urge to buy in any case. So the whole lot of technologies and this whole lot of technology stack came around where people could come virtually, they could see virtually, they could climb up virtually, they could see how the view from the 10th floor apartment will look like when they see outside if they were to buy this X apartment, then what is the availability of that apartment, how do we pay and block. So the entire technology stack came to help the process where consumer could at least 95%, 80% do what they want to do before they booked a house. So, I think there's a need, there was a need, there was a mechanism, there was an innovation involved, there was things which were to be put together, and all of that made a lot of sense as far as consumer is concerned, and the experience became better, and that's where technology came in place.
Gaurav.
Yeah, I'll actually give you a shorter one that we talk a lot amongst our organization. I think I've read a lot lately also around design thinking, and there's a lot of use of the word consumer, and largely end consumer. But I think there are various stakeholders in the consumer journey, and these stakeholders are a part of the ecosystem that you talk about. And for me, I think if you create value at every stakeholder level, the final experience will be awesome. So I think that's the way I would go about it.
I think a very well made point, because this reminds me of, I was talking to Mr. Joshi of Apollo Home Care. I think what you said, that the experience at the end consumer is something which drives adoption and makes it memorable. And I think in that model, probably they put the patient at the center of it to understand that how elder care can be given at doorstep, and how that can really make experience much better than somebody who is a 70, 80, 90-year-old person trying to take himself out of the house and get into a hospital, wait there. So it's a great model of, I would say, design thinking-led approach. With that, we bring this session to a close. Few takeaways. Design thinking as a principle looks at consumer and empathy at the center of it. Being cognitive and strategic is extremely important to ensure that the product or the service that you're trying to innovate or deliver is made for a purpose. And that's what drives design thinking as a philosophy. With that, thank you all for a patient listening. Thank you, panelists, for an engaging conversation.